Right guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to be doing a book review for The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. This is the first of Chandler's detective series, which follows private detective Philip Marlowe as he goes around on various adventures solving crime. This one in particular is about him starting working for a guy called General Sternwood as he is being blackmailed due to the actions of his wild and unruly daughters. This is a fantastic book, I think, especially for the type of book it is, and I think only because of the type of book it is. It doesn't match up, I think, with things that I wanted out of it going in, but by the end I was absolutely sold on the book. So let's dive in with some of the positives, shall we? So the first thing I have to say in positive for this book is that the writing style is absolutely phenomenal. Raymond Chandler has this really good grasp of imagery, especially succinct imagery. Like, he creates a mood and a tension and an atmosphere in this book that he does with so few words and in such a marvelously evocative way, that I think authors of today who just write pages and pages and pages of description for things could really learn a lesson from. This is a real good example of showing and not telling in terms of building your mood and your atmosphere, and I think that also carries over to the second thing that I wanted to mention, which is the characters and the dialogue. The characters are shown to you in this book. We're not told about them like from other characters. Like, there's no side character that's like, oh, that Philip Marlowe, he's such and such. There's none of that. Like, you get to learn about the character, especially of the main character and the other major characters in the book. Like, you get to learn about their personality through the things they do and say. The dialogue is so good and witty, and like, it's got such a good repertoire between the characters that even though the characters lack some development, which I will talk about a little bit more later, I think they really come across as very strong characters, and they are very fun to read about. So the third talking point here is the pacing of the book. Now, as I mentioned before, Raymond Chandler has a real good ability to craft a world and a mood and an atmosphere incredibly quickly through the use of creative imagery, and I think that really comes through in a positive way when it comes to the actual pacing of the book. The pacing of the book is so fast and snappy, because, you know, Philip Marlowe is the kind of character that doesn't just sit around planning things. He's a man of action, and that is really ties in with the mood that Chandler's created. The plot doesn't slow down. It really goes from beat to beat to beat. Very few slow moments during the book, and I thought that was really good, especially for the type of breakneck speed thriller that this is trying to be. Now, we do need to talk about some negatives, because there are some negatives. I mentioned earlier about the characters being lacking in development, and what I mean by that is not so much that we don't learn about who they are and what they are as people. What I think is, because of the nature of the book and the nature of the series, we don't get a lot of growth from them. Most of the characters, from what I understand, are like one-shot characters. I haven't read any other Philip Marlowe stories, so I don't know if they pop up again, but like the Sternwood daughters, like, I doubt they'll ever come up again. General Sternwood, definitely don't think he'll come up again. Like, the villain in this, like, he won't come up again. The only constant is Philip Marlowe, and he's a very static character. Like, he's already developed to his end goal when we meet him, and that's because he doesn't really have any personal motivation for things other than being a private investigator. He does what he does for money, and that is, in my opinion, that's a negative, just because I do like having characters with arcs, especially arcs that tie into a theme, which will draw into another negative. But I'm not opposed to having characters that are more static, especially in this kind of book. Like, it's a negative for me, but I wouldn't let it put you off, because he is a fun character to read about, even if he doesn't really go anywhere. Now that sort of ties in actually with the second criticism that I have, is that it's all very surface level. There's no real central premise to the book. There's no thesis statement that it's trying to make. It's not commenting on anything. There's no real desire to come with a grandiose theme. And I personally enjoy books that I can really think about, and that get me thinking, especially about themes that I may not have come across before, and that's something that this book does lack. It lacks in that, and as a result I think the characters are lacking in development. Because there's no central premise, you can't build character that supports those themes. That's a negative, again, like really only for me. I wouldn't let it put you off if you're just looking for a sort of fun summary read. Not that big a deal. The only last criticism that I have, and this one is a bit more of a big deal than the others, is that the plot is quite confusing. It does move very fast, but I think because of that, you don't have a lot of moments to sit and reflect on what you've just learned or things that you've read, and things move from point to point to point very quickly, and as a result I think sometimes Chandler loses his focus a lot of the time. There's quite a famous story where when they were adapting the film version of this book, the writers contacted Chandler and said, there's a character in here that gets killed off and we can't figure out who did it. And he said, you're complete idiots, it's right there in the book. And then later on he said, actually I looked at it myself and I don't know either. So that's like he's written this really fast breakneck story about these characters, and it's all really interesting, but sometimes plot threads literally do just get cut off and he has no idea how they resolve. So that's a bit of a negative. It's not enough for me to say that it's not worth reading, but it does sort of hamper it from being perfect. Now, in summary then, this book is a really good old school detective story. It's about a tough guy and beautiful women and nefarious villains, and it's really simplistic, but it's really fun. And that's what it wants to do, so I can't fault it for that. I think you need to judge a book by what it wants to do, not what you wanted it to do, and I think it really nails what it was trying to go for. Apart from that one incident where there's a plot thread that literally just doesn't have an ending. Apart from that, brilliant read, great book, definitely highly recommended. Now, the final thing I wanted to discuss with you before I go, as always, is a film recommendation. And what film could I pick other than, obviously, The Big Sleep, starring Humphrey Bogart, starring Lauren Bacall. It's a brilliant adaptation. Like, people that say the book is better than the movie, fine, that's your opinion, but like, this movie is absolutely dynamite. It really is it's a Bogart classic. If you've never seen old school film noir detective story, this is probably one of the ones to go for. It's really good. It clears up quite a lot of the stuff from the book. The performances are excellent. The direction's fantastic. And Humphrey Bogart, man. Humphrey Bogart's a legend. You can't say no. On a more modern tack, actually, we've got LA Confidential. This is a real homage to the kind of film that The Big Sleep was. It's a detective story that was made... I think it was made in the 90s, if not the early 2000s. 1997 this was made. So this is a much more modern take on the same sort of themes. It's got Russell Crowe, it's got Kevin Spacey, you've got Guy Pearce, and of course you've got Kim Basinger, who's a fantastic femme fatale. It's a great film. The only misstep I think it makes is Danny DeVito has a character in there that I think was a bit forced in. But if you're looking for something a little bit more modern, you can't stand your black and white features, then you want something with full Technicolor magic, this is a good bet as well. Great little detective film. And that is it, basically, guys. So thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for the accompanying discussion video. It's going to be a good one. And I will see you next time.